I have been waiting for weeks to make this video, but here it is, you guys. Here are my nonfiction Group B Booktube Prize results. Hope you enjoy. Stay for the end. Hi, it's Kim at Middle of Book March, and here we go. I'm going to go right into it. These are my results for the nonfiction Group B of the Booktube Prize semifinals. Is it the semifinals? It is the semifinals. Preparation. Quite honestly, I'm probably never going to prepare more than I already do or don't right now, so I hope you're used to it by now. I'm going to go quickly through books for the first 5 books I'm going to tell you about. I'm going to go in order from 6 to 1, and I have prepared a separate video for my number 1 because once I finished it, I had to put my thoughts on video immediately, so it's going to be its own little clip. So let me get started. I'm going to review the first 6 books quickly, and I have one disclaimer. All of the bottom 5 books are still all well-written books. Some are stronger than others, so there wasn't really a dud, but I had clear rankings, actually very clear, so this was a little easy. Number 6 was Inferno, a memoir of motherhood and madness by Catherine Cho. This, I'm looking over at some notes. It's an account of a young mother's postpartum psychosis and what led up to that. She is Asian American, and what does her Asian culture have to do with that? She talks a lot about that in the book. It's a very detached account because she had to rely on friends and family's information and memories to put this book together. And she lost quite a bit of her own time while she was in the midst of this psychotic break. So it's a little cold, a little detached, but it is a very interesting topic. My number 6. Number 5, Conditional Citizens on Belonging in America by Layla Lalami. This is an essay collection about American citizenship, inclusion, and it's a very short book, so I was a little kind of leery at first. And I think I was right because it's choppy, a little bit disjointed. There's a lot of different essay topics, not just on gaining citizenship or what happens after a person who has immigrated to the U.S. has gained citizenship. What is the culture shock as they're dropped into American culture? She went through all different types of topics, and it was a little choppy, disjointed. There were a few nuggets of information that she put in the essays that I thought were inaccurate, but I didn't have enough time or take the time to kind of research those, so that was just my sense. So that was my number 5. Number 4, this was a shocker, this was a surprise. My number 4 is A Promised Land by Barack Obama. I expected this was going to be 1 or 2, but no, I don't even have to tell you what this is about. You know what it's about. This is his volume 1. This is super long. It's long. Did I say that? He goes into minute detail, very granular detail of political processes, of political decisions, different events that happened in his first 4 years of his presidency, on and on and on. It is also a very male-centric book. He is a male. He was the president, so it's from his perspective, yes, but it's very male-centric, the people that he's surrounded by, the conversations that he's had, and I got bored, and I listened. It took me a month and a half to listen to that on audio. Okay, that was my number 4. Number 3 is Hidden Valley Road by Robert Kolker. This is an account of a family with 12 children. 6 of the sons all were diagnosed with schizophrenia. And this was fascinating. You know, I've done a lot of reading into different forms of mental illness and how people live with a mental illness or how they've suffered with one, what the outcomes have been. This was fascinating because in between the chapters talking about the family, he gives a lot of information on the nature of schizophrenia, its medical treatment, the history of diagnosis, and what it's treated with. It was fascinating and maddening, and infuriating and harrowing, but very educational. And this was an excellent book, and I almost thought this might end up in the top 2, but this is my number 3. Number 2 is After the Last Border by Jessica Goudeau. This is a nonfiction, of course it's nonfiction. This is the account of 2 families who become immigrants to the US, and they end up in Texas. One family is from Myanmar, another one is from Syria. This is extremely well written, very emotional, scary, terrifying. The danger and trauma that they went through. Some of these families lived in refugee camps in their home countries for decades. What they went through to be eligible to win immigration by lottery, or how they were chosen to emigrate to the US from their home countries, whether they could bring their families with them, who was able to go with them. This was an extremely well-written book. Another very big surprise for me because I wasn't sure if I was going to like it or not. It was excellent. I highly recommend you reading it, especially after the Trump presidency. Really interesting information. She goes into a lot of detail about how different organizations in the U.S. help immigrants. She is a person who does work with a volunteer organization that helps immigrants kind of assimilate when they get here, and how they can be supported. It's an excellent book. I highly recommend it. Here's the moment. I'm going to insert a different video clip. My number 1 pick is this, because I recorded this part of the video far earlier than the Booktube Prize round was done, because I needed to record my thoughts on my number 1 pick for nonfiction group B, and that is Red Comet by Heather Clark, The Short Life and Blazing Art of Sylvia Plath. Because this book weighs about 50 pounds, I'm going to put it down and insert a picture now. This book consumed me. I started reading it at the beginning of June, and I finished it on July 16th. It consumed every waking moment, every thought, whether I was reading it, had to put it down to make dinner, or was getting too tired to continue to read and knew it was bedtime, when I was at work, when I was driving. It consumed all of my thoughts. It's a brilliant masterpiece of a biography of Sylvia Plath. Heather Clark spent 10 years doing the research and crafting and writing this book. She managed to show me the life and the depth and the personality of Plath. This was not the all-American girl who became a brilliant artist and died too early. She was a fully developed, fully flawed, transparent human being. There is so much about her marriage to Ted Hughes. We also learn much about him, and Clark still manages to provide objective information so that I, as the reader, was more than able to form my own opinions about Hughes as a person, his input into their marriage, his fault or guilt related to Plath's death. And I was able to, on my own, form my own opinions based on the information in Clark's biography, combined with everything I had already known and read about Ted Hughes, to come to the conclusion that yes, he was an arrogant prick. Sylvia made the choice to take her life. Was Hughes culpable? Was he guilty of pushing her to it? Did he have some sort of sway or influence over how she felt, over what her last month was like? I'm sure he did. And Clark is brilliant at providing us different pieces of information, snippets of conversation, journal entries. So it's very easy for the reader to form our own opinion, and that's exactly what I did. The book is comprehensive. We learn everything about Sylvia from her birth until her death. And we learn about her childhood up until her father died when she was 8. We learn about her family of her brother Warren, and her mother Aurelia, who was a single mother and raised her children as a single mother for the rest of their lives, for the rest of her life. We learn about Sylvia's clear precociousness as a young child and her intellectualism and brilliance in her later childhood and her teenage years, her college career, her social life. There's so much in the book, in the beginning of the book, about Sylvia's social life. She craved male attention, and much of the early part of the book talks about her dating life, all of the boys that she knew, what her views were on each of her dates, multiple boys dating at the same time, so many relationships where she thought, this is the boy I'm going to marry. And throughout the book, before she met Ted Hughes, and after their marriage crumbled, the amount of attention that she seemed to crave and demand was enormous. And we learned about her as a woman and what it was like for her, with her brilliant mind and her feminist tendencies, to have been brought up in the 50s and to enter her adulthood in the late 50s, early 60s. She was dropped into the wrong decade. And that lent so much to her state of mind and her depression, her feelings of repression and feeling trapped in her life. There was so much expectations on her as a woman in the 50s, a young woman, so many things that she was told she was supposed to want: a husband and children. And once she had that, her independence was over because she was expected to devote herself to her family. Her life took a very traditional turn after her marriage to Hughes, in that she was the wife, she was the homemaker, she was the housewife for a long time. She was also his agent and his business manager, because he felt he was above that part of a literary career. All he felt he needed to do was write. And she was the one who sent out manuscripts and who built him up in the public eye, in the literary world. She was the one that created appointments for him, that set things up for prize submissions. She sent his manuscripts to agents and editors and publishers. He would not have lifted a finger to do that for himself. And in that, she subjugated her own identity and her art in order to push his to the forefront. Clarke is brilliant in the way she writes all of these events. She takes one letter snippet after another, journal entries, parts of conversations based on interviews with Sylvia's family and friends. I was blown away by the artistry in this book, in this biographical masterpiece. Sorry, I'm getting my notes off my laptop. One of the other things that Clarke does so well is she provides a realistic picture of these two faulty, flawed people, broken people, brilliant but broken. So Sylvia does not come off as an angel, an innocent angel. She definitely has problems, and the combination of these two people in this small marriage, there was not enough room in this marriage for these two minds to exist as equals. The thing that I was wondering throughout the entire biography was, could she have lived had she had access to modern psychiatric treatment? Would these two powerful poets have been who they became without each other? As dysfunctional and violent and abusive and completely broken their marriage became, would they have been the artists that they were if they didn't have each other to explode off of? What would have happened had Hughes been more of an equal partner and less of a narcissistic prick? Would he have pushed her to greatness? It was, to me, it was so dark to read at times, because you could see the descent. I could tell the descent of her mentally and psychologically. It was very sad and extremely dark, and it provoked anxiety in me because I knew how the book was going to end. And by the time I got to the last 100 pages, I was furiously reading because I needed to get to the conclusion. I needed to end the reading of this book because I just wanted to work out that emotional explosion that I knew was going to come, and it did. This was probably the first nonfiction or biography that made me cry. And even though I knew how it was going to end, and even though I could feel it now, even though I knew what happens to her, what happened to her, how her life ended, it was so, it created a feeling of despondency when I read the words of what she actually did and how that affected her family. I feel like I'm gutted. I feel like there's a hole in the middle of my gut. I was blown away by this book. And because of it, not because of it I own this, but I've had this copy of The Bell Jar, the 50th anniversary edition, which I love. It's paperback with French flaps and deckled edges. So I've had this copy. I've read this book many years ago, and it's going to get a reread. Shortly after I purchased Red Comet, before I even started reading it, I had also purchased the collected poems of Sylvia Plath. This was the winner of the Pulitzer Prize, edited by Ted Hughes, so there was some controversy that there were missing poems, but I did go through the contents, and I have found many of her major poems, including the poems she wrote in just the last months of her life. And I also have this massive 2-volume set of the letters of Sylvia Plath. This one is volume 1, 1940 to 1956, and that would have been when her relationship and marriage to Ted Hughes began. And this one is volume 2, 1956 to 1963. So I have acquired those as well. This book was a different reading experience for me. I still feel almost empty emotionally and won't ever forget this brilliant biography, this masterpiece of this blazingly talented and unfortunately severely ill woman who has forever changed the literary world and forever changed the world of poetry and artistry. I am very grateful to have read this book, and couldn't think of another one that would have been #1 in my ranking for the Booktube Prize. This is one of the top 2 books I've read this year so far, excluding George Eliot novels. It was incredible. The reading experience was so memorable, emotional, literary. This book blew me away. And I have since collected several other books on Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes and of poetry, and I just can't say enough about this behemoth of a book. The reading pages were 938, I think, and I can't recommend this enough. If you are a fan of biographies, specifically literary biographies, this is a must-read, so please pick this up. That's it for me. Those are my Booktube rankings for Nonfiction Group B. Write me a comment down below. What do you think? What did you vote for? What did you hope was going to be in the top 3 of anybody's videos who judged? And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.